What we're looking at is about the appreciating the Quran, and when we look at the Quran, we can appreciate the Quran from many different facets and many different angles. And that's what makes it such a wondrous book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed for us. And so I wanted to first of all contemplate upon the first of Surah Al-Buruj, the first 3 lines, where Allah makes an oath. وَالسَّمَاءِ, are you familiar with it? وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ وَشَاهِدٍ وَمَشْهُودٍ. So Allah makes an oath. And when Allah makes an oath, something very, very important. Like, for example, when we make an oath, we're very serious about something. So if you say to me, "Cuss me, bro," we probably overuse the phrase, but you're trying to emphasize to the person that this is something very serious and I'm speaking genuinely here. And so Allah is calling our attention to something that's very serious. He says, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ. He says, look above you. Sama in Arabic does not necessarily just mean the heavens or the sky. It means all that's above you, the sama. So he says, وَالسَّمَاءِ. And you hear it in the Arabic. وَالسَّمَاءِ. As if it just, this elongation creates wonder in you. ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ. That holds. That in Arabic means it holds something with power. It contains something. And that thing can't escape it. It has a hold on it. Dhatil Buruj. And it's translated as constellations usually. But Buruj, and this is what so much is often lost in the language, is that Buruj, from the word Baraja, we have the word Tabarruj. And Tabarruj means to display your beauty. And a Burj in Arabic is like a fortress or a tower. And so the idea is that look above you and wonder at that's all that's above you that contains these beautiful wonders, these enormous wonders as well. It has these nuances. And so we translate that as constellations. But really in Arabic, it just means objects that hold enormous beauty and create enormous wonder in the mind of the beholder. وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ. And then Allah makes a second oath, the promised day, the day that's promised, which is obviously, he's referring to the day of judgment, of Qiyamah. And then he says, وَشَاهِدٍ وَمَشْهُودٍ. And this is very rich here, because one of the devices in Arabic is that Allah uses the indefinite to create wonder. He says, and I swear by something that witnesses and something that's witnessed. And we could look at that. The scholars differ. Some say that it's Yawm al-Jum'ah, and the first one is Yawm al-Jum'ah, the day of Friday. The shahid, the witness, because it testifies for you. And that which is testified is day of Arafah, because the angels testify for the people and so forth. There's many different interpretations upon that. But it's interesting that Allah uses the indefinite here. The indefinite creates wonder. Because if it's indefinite, it's not been defined. So and I'm swearing by something that witnesses and something that is being witnessed. And so that could be, Allah knows best, is about the subjective experience and the objective experience. That when we look at this thing all above us, yes, we look at it and we observe it as material, but there's something deep beyond this, the subjective experience of what you're beholding about this. And the Quran is very much likened to the stars. And if you look at the end of this surah, it all comes back to the theme of this surah is that you can't do one over Allah. You may think that you have power and you can control things, but the reality is your attempts are futile and Allah's truth will be manifest. بَلْ هُوَ قُرْآنٌ مَجِيدٌ فِي لَوْحٍ مَحْفُوظٍ. It's in. This is a recitation. And he uses the indefinite as well here again. A Qur'an, a wondrous recitation. بل هو قرآن مجيد, that's exalted, في لوح, in a preserved tablet that's mahfuz. Sorry, in a tablet where something's recorded, mahfuz, that's protected. So I'm repeating myself there. In a tablet that's mahfuz, that is protected. Now, there are two narrations of mahfuz. One is mahfuzun, with double dhamma or double bash, and the other one with double kasra, double zir. And depending on what the recitation gives you, it gives you a different understanding. That either the mahfuz, what's protected, is it the lawh or is it the Qur'an? And what Allah is really trying to say, well, Allah knows best, is that they're one and the same. You can't touch this Qur'an. You try to eradicate the truth, it won't be able to. Because it's preserved. Not only is it preserved in Lawh al-Mahfuz, it's preserved itself. So it's as if Allah is alluding to both here. And this is the richness of the Arabic language. And so, when we study the Qur'an, one of my dreams is that we can study Qur'an like people study Bible study. Like my mother, every week she goes to a Bible study class and they have their commentaries and they sit together. The Auntie G's do this, yeah. But we need to look at our book like a map for us, and we need a connection. Together we connect around it. And it's only when I found that only when we come together and discuss the Qur'an that it comes, for me personally, it comes alive. Other people, the Qur'an comes alive when they're reciting it. They just love the sound of it. Other people like to memorize. That's their passion of memorizing it. Other people like to look at tafsir. The Qur'an can be engaged in many, many ways. One of my passions is discussing it. Because when we discuss it, things just jump out at you. Even I was just reading this surah today, and I didn't think about this ever before. Allah says, shahid wa mashhud. And then what does he say in the middle of the surah? Wallahu والسماء ذات البروج واليوم الموعود وشاهد ومشهود قتل أصحاب الأخدود النار ذات الوقود إذ هم عليها قعود الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء شهيد. So we have all three forms of this word used in this surah. Shahid, mashhud, and then it explains that Allah is the shaheed, He's the witness over everything. So this is what happens when you contemplate in the Qur'an. Things just jump out at you. And you start to see the synchronicity in the Qur'an, just like we see synchronicity in our lives. And that's very powerful when we see that. I do therapy and counselling. And when we see synchronicity in our life, we see things that just seem like a coincidence, but there's too profound to be a coincidence. It sort of shifts and gives us meaning and gives us consolation. There was a person whose friends were shot in a school shooting, and they were really struggling to get over it. And they were thinking about it as they were sitting in the car, and then all of a sudden, and it was two friends that were killed, and he survived, and he had survivor's guilt. He really struggled to accept that he survived. How could he survive? Why didn't they shoot him? Then when he was thinking this, he saw 3 birds in the sky, and 2 flew off in one direction, the other flew in the other. And he got his answer. This is what we call synchronicity. When things just seem, and everyone's had this experience in their life. The Qur'an's like this as well. Like we see synchronicity in creation, we may need something, suddenly we read the Qur'an, and we've read that surah time and time and time again, and boom, something jumps out at you and gives you an answer. You think, subhanallah, I've read this time and time again, and it's given me an answer now, and I never even had that, I never even looked at it like that. That's happened to me time and time again with the Qur'an. And so, this book is what I'm assuming, I haven't read it, but when you start to see this sequencing, this tansiq of the Qur'an, i.e., why is Allah, you put this surah over that surah? Why has He begun here and ended here? You start to see profound things. And I just want to give an example of that. So, an example I've got here is of Surah come up? I shouldn't have pressed that button. Has it worked? Hey. No. So here, look. So if we look at the 27th juz, which I'm going to address two surahs specifically from this juz, them being Surah Rahman and Surah Waqia'ah. We see in this portion, there's a running theme throughout all of them. Now that doesn't seem obvious. Just like the stars, when we look at the stars, we think they're beautiful, they are. But when you actually study the stars as a science, you think, my God, there's some intelligent design behind this. And that, obviously that was so relevant and profound for people before we had all this technology. People relied upon the stars for guidance. And so they could see this design behind it. And when they looked up, it was guiding them. And the Qur'an's very much like that. You see it, yeah, it sounds beautiful, mashallah. And the meaning's nice, but then when you read and you see this synchronicity, then it has a profound impact on you. So it says in the 27th juz, the themes are the reality of the unseen, specifically the next life and its terrors. Every surah in the 27th either starts with a description of the Day of Judgment, or it's about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they generally interchange with one another. All the chapters begin by addressing the impending nature of the next life and the dissolution of the systems that the elements of the nature follow in this life. These surahs cover the bliss of the people in the next life and the details of their experience. There are numerous sections that pose rhetorical questions to encourage inquiry and challenge those who reject to really reflect on this revelation. And all the chapters finish on glorifying and praising Allah, and then they lead into the next juz, which is the musabbihat, which is glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see that when you study this, it's very difficult for me in about half an hour for you to appreciate this. But when you go through each surah after surah, you just see this order, and you just see the profound meaning and the interconnection with the different verses, and it has a profound impact on you. And a short example of this is when you look at Surah Rahman, you look at the order and the themes in Surah Rahman. Look, you have the nature of the Quran, the creative power of God, the retrospective questions, like these questions being posed at people to reflect, and then the people of the hell, and then the people of the highest merit. Go to Surah Waqia'ah, what do you see? The absolute opposite of it, but they run back in with one another. The people of paradise, that's number 5, to Rahman, to number 1. The people of hell, that's number 4, Rahman, 2. Retrospective questions, number 3. And isn't it interesting that the retrospective questions come in the middle, because you're posed with the two themes and think about it, as if you're in the middle of those issues and you're having to reflect about those things. And then number 5, the nature of the Quran. And then the 3 divisions of the people is the 6th thing. He has an extra point, Surah Waqia'ah comes in, and then leads you into Surah Al-Hadid, which is the last surah of that. So there's this sense of the Quran going in a flow and then coming back on itself, which is this idea in creation, is that we're constantly, let me get one, we're going through a separation to what we know, to initiation to something we don't know, and then returning back to what we initially were, but looking at things from a different perspective. And we're constantly doing that in our life. As we leave our house in the morning, we go to work, we come back. Is it the same? It's not the same. Some of us might think, oh, I'm just bored of the doldrums of life. In reality, when we reflect, we truly realize that we are someone different now. But that requires inquiry. Another amazing thing brings us to a theme in the Quran of Chiasm. Are people familiar with the concept of Chiasm? Chiasm is where the story begins and then it wraps round back on itself. And one of the greatest examples of this is in Surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf is an amazing surah. It's the only surah that really follows a story from beginning to end. The Quran is not linear usually. The Quran is very much like a stream of consciousness of the divine. Do we think in a linear way? Our thoughts are going we think they're going all over the place, but there is some sort of underneath the surface of our thoughts, there's some pattern leading us somewhere. And it's this amazing quote by James Joyce. He wasn't a very savoury character, James Joyce, but he wrote the Odyssey, which is Ulysses, which is considered like one of the greatest books in literature. He said, I put so many enigmas and puzzles that it will keep the professors busy for centuries asking over what I meant. And that's the only way of ensuring one's immortality. It's an amazing quote, because that's exactly what the Arabs did with their poetry. And they wanted their poetry to be hung in the Kaaba so they would be remembered, because they said that's the only way you're going to have immortality. The Quran, this is basically the Quran. Allah's put so much, not that everything's a mystery, He's made things clear because it's guidance, but there's hidden mysteries that when we reflect, they just keep opening up and up and up. And one of the most famous devices that James Joyce used in the Ulysses was his concept of the stream of consciousness. It's not linear, Ulysses. It actually goes in and out of people's consciousness. And that's very much what the Quran's like. It's taking you from one theme to the next. And then you think, how on earth did we get round here? And then you realise there's this correlation. And that has a profound impact. If you think about some movies, I think movies, how the movie starts and you're not knowing where the movie's going, and then right at the end of the movie you think, I think the one that comes to mind the best was Usual Suspects. I don't know if anyone saw that. Is at the end of the movie you think, oh my God, how did this all happen? And so you have to watch the whole movie again to make sense of it. This is what the Quran's like, but you have to keep doing it every time with the Quran because it's exhausting. Now, I can say these things to you, and you think, yeah, mashallah, subhanallah. But when you experience it, when you really experience it in your interaction with the Quran, so when someone comes up to you and goes, why do you think your religion's the truth? Because the Quran is a living miracle. Okay, it's as if we're saying it for rote. But when you experience that, when the Quran jumps out at you, you say, this book is incredible. And you're saying it from your heart because you've interacted with it. So, the Surah Yusuf is the only surah that really has a beginning and end in terms of it's a linear storyline. And it's the 12th surah in the Quran. And how many brothers are in it? 12. And it has 12 steps in it, which is a chiasm that works back on itself. And this surah was revealed in one. It came to the Prophet ﷺ at an instant. Whilst other surahs, obviously, some of them were revealed piecemeal. So what do we have? We have Yusuf's dream. Then number 12 is the dream fulfilled. Then we have his brother's plot, and then Joseph's plot. So it's working back. Do you see what I'm doing? And then you have the attempted seduction, and then the confession of the seducer. And then you have his effect on her friends, and then the confession of her friends. And then you have the prison, and you have Joseph's release, and then right in the middle you have the king's dream. So you've got the beginning dream, middle dream, end manifestation of the dream, and then you've got the interpretation of the dream. That's phenomenal if you think about it. This is what a chiasm is. And what's so profound about this is because our life is a chiasm. Everything that's happening in our life is following a sequence, but we can't figure out why it's happening. And when you pan out and see things from a divine perspective, then you can see, oh my God, it's all working as if it's working like a whirlpool, back and forth between one another until we reach our end. And that's what the Quran is. The Quran is when you realize these things, the Quran is like a manifestation of reality in front of you. And it takes working out. And that's why books like this, and we need more and more books like this in English, talking about what the themes of each the themes of each juz, and how they work with one another. You know, the only real person in English that I've seen really touch upon this stuff is Rahman with the Bayyinah Institute. They've touched upon this. But it needs to be part of our life where we actually talk about these things. And it's really interesting how in the movie industry, most films that we are passionate about, especially guys, the movies that get you connected, like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and why do you think they capture our consciousness so much? There's got to be a reason. It's because it follows a particular pattern, which in the movie industry they use Joseph Campbell's monomyth, the hero's journey, which they condensed. It's about 19 steps but they condensed it in the movie industry generally down to 12. And Yusuf's journey is that. i.e. the ordinary world. Yusuf with his father is just, living as a nomad on the land. Then the call to adventure, the dream. Then the refusal of the call. In Yusuf's journey, there's not really a refusal of the call as much. There's more of a disturbance of that, like being thrown down the well. Then the meeting of the mentor, which is like with God with him in this story. He's constantly consoling him in each part of the story. Then the crossing of the threshold, he leaves his father and he's abandoned and taken into Egypt. Then the allies and the enemies that come to him in his life. And then his rock bottom, the innermost cave, which is the prison. And you could see that as the ordeal as well. And then him coming out of that with a reward, and then his journey back. And his resurrection, i.e. he is the ruler on the land. And then him being able to give a gift even to his family. Every one of us is going through this journey. And if you think about your favourite movies, they all follow that. I can do like Luke Skywalker if you want. Tatooine. Call to adventure, Obi-Wan, you're our only hope. Refusal of the call, I've got to go work on the moisture farm with my uncle and auntie. I can't go with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan turns up, meeting of the mentor, crossing of the threshold, Mos Eisley, the bar. Test allies and enemies, the most unlikely people, i.e. a hairy Chewbacca and Han Solo, a mercenary, end up being their closest friends. And the people they thought necessarily might be with them, they don't. The death of the mentor, that's another step where Obi-Wan has to die, so you have to become independent. You can't rely on your mentors all your life. Innermost cave, he goes to the Death Star. The ordeal with Darth Vader, and then and so forth and so forth. You get the point. Every one of us in our lives are doing this. The Quran touches upon this in the story of Yusuf in this Chiasm. So it's very, very beautiful. How am I doing for time so I don't overrun? How long? Few more minutes. 5 minutes, that's fine. 5:30 I'll wrap up. So these are some themes. Other devices in the Quran is a very beautiful device called ilfitat, which I call camera shifts. A device in Arabic that sometimes doesn't work in English is where Allah shifts the person. So in English, in every language, we have first person, second person, and third person, don't we? What's first person? I. I'm there, someone's here. What's second? So I, number one, first. What's second person? You. To you. That's how I do it with my students. What's third person? He, she, it, they. I say they're the ones you're chin-wagging about because they're not in your presence, so you talk about them. That's third person. Allah is constantly shifting person even within one surah he does it. I'll give you an obvious example. In the Fatiha, Allah starts the surah in third person. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah. Allah's speaking to us, but He's speaking as if He's in the third person. It's like me coming up to you and saying, Idris is a great guy. You're not worthy to be in His presence. So I'll speak in the third person because I'm so unrelatable to you guys. That's the use. So it's as if we're praising Allah, but we can't fathom His qualities because He's speaking about Allah's qualities, and we can't fathom. So Allah starts speaking to us. We're speaking with Allah's words to Him in the third person. It's crazy if you think about it. It's like we're praising Allah with His words because we can't address Him and praise Him in the way that's fitting. It's like you want to date a girl, you want to marry a girl, and you say, I'm going to muck it up, love. So she says, look, this is what I want you to say to me. So she writes all the words to you and says, on the day when I'm on the balcony and you're at the bottom, just memorize these words and say them. So you say them to her and you speak to her in the third person because you're not worthy to be in her presence. She is so beautiful. She is so magnanimous. Okay, and she's like, he touched me. And he says, yes, I knew it. These weren't your words, these were my words. And that's what we're doing with Allah. It's an analogy to see that we're addressing Allah and we know we're going to muck it up, so He's given us the words to say to connect to Him, because out of His mercy. Then he goes, Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the most merciful, the most kind, master of the day of judgment. And then what do we say? You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. So it was He, Allah, He. And then suddenly it shifted to you. Why? Because when you accept your slavehood to Allah, that you need Him, then you can experience Him in the second person. You can actually have a conversation with Him. That's what that device is. That's phenomenal if you think about it. And there's even more radical shifts in person in the Quran than that. And I call them camera angle shifts. Because if you're looking at me, I've got this camera at the moment on one angle. After about 10 minutes, probably 5 minutes, people will switch off watching this video on YouTube. Because it's just at one angle. So what do we need? Or Indo-Pak soap operas. You need the camera angle to keep the attention, don't you? Because if it's on one angle, you start losing interest. The Quran does this. It's called tafannun in Arabic. It's like an art. It's artistry. Allah shifted and shifted from there. It's like you're going, whoa, whoa, what are you doing here? And it keeps your interest. It's an amazing thing. And so, for me to speak about the Quran for 30 minutes, there's so much that, and that's why, here's the plug, guys, that's why basically I set up which is connecting to the Quran, why are we studying Arabic? It's an Arabic course in order for us to connect to the Quran, that's it. Not so I can ask for an ice cream when I go to Jordan next year. Okay, because what relevance does that have? And I'm not dismissing that, but ultimately most of us only have the time to focus on something of the Arabic. And what do you need to focus on the most? The connection to the Quran. So it becomes part of your life. And alhamdulillah, this has been my passion really, for people to be able to do that. And when you study the grammar and in a practical way, and in a practical and accessible way, you think, my God, people walk out and they think, this is not the words of a human being. And that's really what we should be being able to appreciate when we read the Quran. And when we do it together collectively, it has a very profound impact as well. There's a benefit when we do it by ourselves. There's another experience when you're doing it with other people as well. Did you get that? Subhanallah. And so I hope you've gained some sort of appreciation of the Quran today in what I've been saying. And if anyone's interested, I'm planning to actually run this in Manchester next year, inshallah. And I'm going to be doing some taster courses in Manchester. We haven't got a location confirmed yet. If anyone's interested, there's a flyer there with information. And you can check out the videos on my YouTube channel, Idris Watts, to see similar things like this, which is, there's a playlist called The Pearls of the Quran, and touching upon these things. So that we really, we don't cognitively connect to the Quran, we connect with our heart. It's an emotionally felt connection, and that's what's going to save our iman in this day and age because if we only connect with the head, anyone can convince you of anything. But when you feel it in your heart, there's no one that's going to be able to sway you. Well, thank you very much.